and perhaps go through a few introductions. We have a gentleman sitting over here, sir. Could you identify yourself?
John Andrews.
Are you representing any particular group?
I am with New Flyer Bus Manufacturing.
Excellent. Thank you for being here. Nice
And
to
someone
see you.
I've known for 25 years, 30, I don't know, since I was like 5.
Nice to have you here. Brad, you have a new staff person I think you might like to introduce, don't
We
you?
do, yes. She was introduced to the PSTA board as a
Which I know.
as a citizen. She was not employed yet by PSTA, but Whitney Fox is our new public relations manager.
Welcome
She's on
aboard.
day number 4. So
And she's
she's
still
doing
here.
great, and she's still here.
What
She's doing
a
great.
great beginning.
Yeah.
Okay, may I have a motion to approve the minutes, please, of September 5th? So moved. It's been moved, and do we have a second? Second. Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Okay, Brad, do you want to go through the meeting schedule?
Yes, I do.
Which I probably have one somewhere.
Do we have one here? Rachel, do you want to say anything about the meeting schedule?
That's pretty much what we've been doing the first Mondays of the month at 11, except for January because of the holiday. I just moved it to the following week. So, I mean, it's pretty much
So,
what we've been doing.
it's a Florida law, which now we know through our work with T-BARTA, that because they hadn't been doing this, that we have to annually publish all of our meetings. And so each committee of PSTA approves its own meeting schedule for the following year in advance. So this is the executive committee meeting schedule. As you know, having served on the executive committee, we probably won't have 12 executive committees. We don't have them. We have them most months, but not every month. But this just sort of sets the calendar up with these dates so that when we can publish them and have them on the calendar.
So I'm not sure why, but this, my computer is not letting me get to the PSTA. Well, I mean, they look fine for today. I don't know if they, welcome, Commissioner
Sorry.
Torga.
Had a commission meeting this morning.
Oh,
Oh.
and did you get stuck in traffic?
No, we finished at 12:30.
Okay. Well, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm a little late.
Late, it's probably that'd be a problem.
Is that right, right near the holiday?
I don't know. When, do you have the dates, Brad? Maybe you're gonna go over that later on in our meeting, but do you have the dates for our upcoming trips?
Yes, I don't believe any of these will conflict with any of the normal times when the trips occur. Again, these are the first Monday of every month, which is the traditional day of the executive committee, and now we're sitting here on a Tuesday.
Sure, sometimes they change, as you all know.
Yeah, this committee seems to change more than the other ones. Or,
All right. So, and you wanna talk about the triennial review?
Want to make a quick motion just to approve?
I move we approve the meeting schedule for
Oh,
2019.
sorry about that. Thank you, Rachel. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
I didn't get a motion.
I did.
In a second. Thank you.
Well, 3 now.
Oh, 3.
So the next item we just wanted to talk about, I think Chair Long received a letter from the Federal Transit Administration, and on PSTA's recent results from our Federal Transit Administration triennial review, and since as you know, Chair Long is our representative on the T-BARTA board. She specifically chose a question to the candidates of the new T-BARTA, for the executive director, that was, what is a triennial review? So maybe you could answer the question.
Well, the reason that question was so important to me is because when I first went on the T-BARTA board, it became abundantly clear, because of my one-on-ones with Whit Blanton, the MPO, that T-BARTA had never done their triennial review audits, so that they were way behind and were soon to lose enormous amounts of money because they hadn't complied with any of the dotting the i's and crossing the t's. So that was pretty much the impetus that caused me to say, hey, Brad, Debbie, can you help us out and get us on the right path, which, as you all know, they did, and now we are miles ahead of where we've ever been. And as a result of that experience, I wanted to make sure that whoever we hired as the new head person at T-BARTA was acutely aware of how important that review is, and that you can lose your money and your designated recipient status, and the list goes on. It's not a pretty picture. Interestingly enough, there was only one candidate that really knew the ins and outs of that, what it meant.
Yeah, well, the David Green, the gentleman that T-BARTA has now hired, being the head of the Richmond Transit System, he was very familiar with it as well.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what it is. Every 3 years, the federal government contracts with auditors, essentially. They come down and they investigate PSTA's adherence to the tomes of rules and regulations that the federal funds we must comply with. I think the number of areas that they could find findings is something in the neighborhood of 60 or 70 different areas. They go out and they look at the buses, because the federal government has paid for most of those buses, so they own them. So they actually check to make sure that you're maintaining them. That's a requirement properly. Everything from that to disadvantaged business enterprise, to civil rights, to that, do we have proper public hearings when we make changes to the fares and certain things. And if you get a lot of findings, you get put into, can't remember what they call it, the naughty list. You get put into the bad grantee list, and that can ultimately lead to you losing your federal funding. It's only happened, I think, in a couple of cases, but it has happened. And certainly it makes you very hard to get additional federal funds, and it just makes your life miserable. So I'm very pleased to report that PSTA has a very stellar record on that. We just completed our triennial review, and we have, as of now, we have no findings. At the end of the review, we had one finding that I would describe as somewhat ticky-tack. It was in our procurement area, which is the #1 area that they like to get you on. But what they found was, PSTA has a whole bunch of different contracts. We have some contracts with software packages that we have spent or invested substantially in, like our scheduling software, that it would be prohibitively expensive to go to another firm. So we're constantly paying licensing agreements to them, and we were upgrading the software package 2 years ago, and the board approved that agreement and everything, and we executed a new agreement with them for the upgrade, and we didn't re-include all of the federal clauses in the upgrade agreement that were already in the base contract. So they were a federally compliant thing, but the auditor felt like we needed to copy and paste all those rules and regs into any subsequent deal. So we did that, they signed it, so we're okay. And we've got a very nice letter here, or Commissioner Long, as the chair of PSTA, got a nice letter from Chris White, Yvette Taylor, who is the regional administrator in Atlanta, congratulating us on a very successful review. Now, we are the grantee now for T-BARTA as well. So the next triennial review makes me a little bit more worried, because the review will be of PSTA for the T-BARTA adherence to all these rules and their grants, because they are a sub-recipient to PSTA, at least for the next, I think the T-BARTA Finance Committee recommended 5 years, probably, until they really kind of maybe get a CFO on board and, get some competency on their staff. So the next triennial review will also include the T-BARTA grants.
So will that be, sorry, go ahead, in 3 years? Or
In 3 years.
are they under? So I think you could be somewhat comforted by the fact that we have a real transit brain coming to T-BARTA.
Yeah.
And I have no question at all about his competence.
Me neither. No, I mean, that's the first step. In addition, I feel very confident because, at least right now, PSDA's procurement staff and Cassandra and her team are the ones actually doing the procurements, the RFPs for the studies and everything. So we're good for now. It's like once we, because we're doing everything for T-BARTA, so we're okay for now.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that.
But that's worth celebrating.
It is worth celebrating, and thank you very much. I hope you're showing the appropriate appreciation to your staff that have worked so hard.
Indeed.
To make that
Indeed.
reality.
Going through it is more like dental work, but getting a root canal, but
But look at the success.
yes.
It's great accomplishment.
Okay, so now do we want to talk about the October board meeting agenda, Brad?
We do, and one thing that I'll just kick us off with is actually our first informational item, and that's why I have Cindy Raskin-Schmidt, our marketing director, here. We presented to the executive committee last month. We held off on presenting to the board. We presented 2 of the 3 different surveys that we have now completed related to our performance scorecard. Essentially, PSTA has 3 key constituencies that we try to meet their expectations: the customers, the employees, and the citizens, the non-riders, the taxpayers. Last month, we presented to you our customer satisfaction survey that was done, that was on board, that our customers rate us very, very high. The ones that are riding, of course, they love us the most. We presented our what we call our employee engagement survey, where we polled all of our employees on how much they're engaged with what PSTA, and they feel buy-in to PSTA, and that was very, very positive. We've got a whole bunch of focus groups and initiatives planned in response to that now in the works. The community survey a phone survey of the taxpayers, non-riders, was a little bit behind, so Cindy's going to give you a brief summary. We just got it on Friday, and that'll be on the agenda in a shortened version with the other 2, so the board will see all 3. But Cindy, you want to give a little summary?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So we used a vendor called HCP to conduct this survey for us. They completed 800 calls with non-riders. The beginning questions they asked to determine if somebody was a rider and they could continue, or not continue, or a non-rider and they could continue. They said, do you know who the public transit provider in Pinellas County is? And 67% of those people said, yes, I know who it is. And when challenged, well, what's the name? 99% of them were able to say PSTA or Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority. So that is huge. right off the bat.
I'm shocked.
That's
I
huge.
know.
That's
Really
huge.
great.
I'm shocked
I'm
at
shocked.
that.
I'm
Yeah,
shocked.
really, really great
How much
game.
did you pay all those people?
Yeah.
How were they selected, I guess, is my bigger
They were
question.
select a random sampling. They got them in a ratio throughout the whole county to make sure we were getting a good balance geographically, a good male-female mix, a good racial mix. So we tried to get a good cross-section of people throughout the county. Now, of those people that couldn't name us, when they were prompted and said, have you heard of PSTA or Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority, 79% of the people said it was extremely familiar or they at least recognized the name. So once they heard it, they knew what it was.
And how much was the second number, 90 something?
99% of the people who said that they knew who we were able to say our name in one of the two forms.
The 1% said the bus.
Bus, yeah.
That's what I read.
I have a great big giant 120-page.
This is the same firm that has done the county's
Oh, okay.
survey every year.
Mhm.
I was going to show you. Where is it? Keep talking.
Okay, so the people were invited to react to 4 different statements and asked if it was disagree, somewhat disagree, unsure, somewhat agree, or do agree. And the 4 questions they picked in this section were based upon the things we have in our Path Forward plan. So 79% of people agree or somewhat agreed with PSTA connects people with the places they need to go in the community, which is basically our mission plan, or our mission statement was very good. 76% agreed that PSTA provides effective, financially viable public transportation that supports our community. 70% said PSTA delivers customer-oriented public transit services, and 63% believe that PSTA provides effective Pinellas transportation leadership. Those are all very, very good numbers, more than 2/3 or 3/4 in some cases. Now, the one that I'm really excited about, if you remember the item that we have in our performance scorecard is, does PSTA deliver value to the community? How do people feel about that? So 9 out of 10 people agreed that we provide value to our community. So 54% agree and 36 strongly agree. And of the 3% that weren't agree, it was only 3% that disagreed and 7% that were unsure. So 90% of our community, non-riding community, believes that we provide good value to our community. So that is really exciting. I knew it was going to be high, but when I saw that 9 out of 10 number, I almost jumped out of my chair. So that's the highlights. They go into a lot of detail where they ask questions about which services have you heard of? Which services would you use? Have you ridden ever? If you don't ride, why would you ride? And so HCP is going to come and do a PowerPoint presentation and go a little bit deeper into it, but that was kind of the highlight. Those were all really great numbers. None of the numbers we saw were negative. We didn't see anything that made us go, ooh. So really feeling positive about it. And we'll use this 90% number as a basis for our scorecard goal for next year. We haven't talked about what we think that should be yet, but it'll be based upon that. I'm also doing some benchmarking with some other transit systems that have done similar surveys to see where their community sentiment is coming out so we can come up with a good target for next year.
I am just shocked. Are you?
I think those numbers are terrific.
They are
Yeah,
terrific, but it's
there's
hard
this
to
graph.
believe.
Do you support the use of tax dollars to improve the county's public transit infrastructure? 92% said yes. Now, I think I saw an article perhaps that the MPO's It's Time Tampa Bay survey, or maybe that's a regional survey, doesn't ask the exact question, asks a similar question, and they get like a 90-some% of people saying that they want more public transit, but they're getting a much lower percentage that they want to pay for it. They don't. Everybody wants more transit, but they don't want to pay for it. Was
Well,
the headline that I saw from that.
I think that those charts and this message should be conveyed to St. Pete Beach ASAP.
Yeah. I was going to show you that. 'Cause
Right.
You've probably seen that at the county. I know the county
Yeah.
publishes a similar kind of. It's much more circular. I've only started looking at this in great detail. I
But
think
that hasn't moved much, that gap between people's expectations and what the real service is on
Right.
the transportation piece.
it's pretty.
If anything,
consistent.
it gets a little wider each year for us, yeah, for the county.
Not for you.
Oh, it gets wider.
Yeah.
Wider, that there's a bigger gap between
what people expect and what they are actually,
Well, not about public transportation, just about transportation in general.
transportation.
Oh,
Ability
yes.
to get
And,
around.
yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for
Yeah,
clarifying.
I think on the county's survey, I recall the biggest gap is on
Yes, transportation.
traffic congestion and transportation of anything.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Um,
So that's a good segue into that funding summit or workshop that all of you transit folks are working on putting together. It was gonna
For
be in the late
January.
fall, but now it's in
January.
January,
Yeah,
which is unfortunate because Mark won't be here then.
yeah.
I think our new administrator is a transit advocate, so we'll see. We'll find
He
out.
told
won't we?
me. That's what-
Yeah.
That was when he was vying for the job, so.
Yeah, right.
Thought I had, I don't know. So, in addition to that positive, and again, we'll summarize this, summarize the employee survey and summarize the customer survey together, because they each are metrics within our survey. And again, I think they speak to what we talked about, Trish talked about last meeting, where the survey is really based on outcomes. It's, do we have direct influence on the taxpayers that don't ride the bus? Not very much, but it's still something we need to pay attention to. Same thing on the riders and even the employees feeling good about working here. So those are key components to the survey, to the scorecard.
These numbers are great outcomes and a great pat on the back, but how are we interpreting them to know what we're doing that's right?
Well, right.
I mean, we could be doing everything right, but, I'm sure maybe there's some things that we're doing better than others, or something that we're doing differently that we weren't doing, a couple of years ago.
Right, well, and we're gonna keep doing these surveys year after year, so then you can
Mhm.
see trends. This is the first year that we've done them in this systematic way. What we do with them is different in every case, of course. For the riders, a lot of it is awareness. And, one of the things that I recall, we didn't get rated that awesomely, but no transit system gets rated very high, according to the consultant, on the buses that run on time. So one strategy they said that some transit systems have done is when people call on the phone or in any interaction that you have, you say, thank you for calling PSTA, our buses run 92% on time, can I help you? You tell the riders your message, and they think differently. That's one thing.
So to that point, Brad, maybe this is an opportunity, since we are doing really great things at PSTA, that Whitney over there could think about writing an op-ed piece that we can talk to our friendly little Tim Nickens and get him to publish
Yeah,
about
I was thinking.
how far we've come from when we were going through the green light episode until now. And it's interesting to see people's thought process changing about the advantages of public transportation.
Yeah, and talk about the technology things that we're doing with,
Yeah.
Uber and all that too.
Madam Chair, if I may,
Yes,
a quick
of course.
question. Has this survey, similar or exact survey, been given in any other metropolitan or regional or areas?
Several transit systems have. I've reached out to my counterparts at other public transit systems. I've heard back from TriMet, Kansas City. There's one third one that I've heard from, and they ask the questions a little bit differently, but pretty close to the same way, and the responses have ranged anywhere on that similar value to the community question, anywhere from like 55 to 85% is what I'm seeing so far.
Thank you.
And then we procured all of these surveys with Heart. So,
Did they do one in their county as well?
did they? I don't know if they've done it.
I'm not sure.
Maybe, I don't know if they've published it yet. Maybe they.
But
All the
did
more
at the
reason to
same
get ours in the paper first.
So Brad, can we get like
Yeah.
summary of that, or maybe even just the charts or something?
Yeah,
I know
how
it's
about
really
the-
long, but.
Probably about the first 18 pages
Okay.
Yeah.
is really good, and then it's all appendix.
Oh, right.
We'll definitely, we'll send the whole thing out, and then the consultant is working on
Oh,
a
okay.
presentation,
All right.
summary. Yeah, and to your point, one of the questions, you know, maybe the only negative, it's not really negative, but they asked, they have this whole list of different things that PSTA provides. Some of our different programs, like corporate bus passing, emergency ride home, TD late shift, all these other things, the Jolly Trolley, and the awareness by non-riders is like in the 50s. You know, 50% of the people had never heard of the Jolly Trolley. Which is
But
kind of
but 50% had.
yeah, yeah. 50 had.
And that's pretty interesting, because if you don't use that medium or that form of transportation, you know, how would you know what all of those things are, what the fares are, all
Well,
of
but
that?
you'd have to have your head in the sand, not to just visually see it when you're out and about. That thing is everywhere.
Well, the Jolly Truck, it's not everywhere in the county.
That's true.
Well,
It's just in.
I thought it was actually surprising to
Not
me
even
that
Pueblo.
well,
I know.
60%,
up and down the beaches,
60% had
up
heard of
and
the
down
downtown
St.
Looper, and only 50% had heard of the Jolly
Century
Trolley.
Beach to the
Yeah.
beaches, you see it everywhere.
But some of us never go to the beach.
There were other questions besides just Jolly Trolley, right? I mean, there were lots of questions. That's pretty significant, if you ask me.
Yeah, well, the number one, 97% of people had heard of PSA providing bus service. They know we run buses. They just didn't know we run trolleys. Or anyway,
Or the complication of contract for the trolley, or you have trolleys.
maybe it's
in
something with that.
contracts.
Yeah, maybe yeah. Anyway, also on the agenda, something that is currently listed on your agenda as item 5C on the consent, but I think we are going to put that on the full agenda. On the action is a agreement that Henry Lukasik, our maintenance director, has reached with Duke Power to pay for some charging equipment here at PSTA instead of us paying for it for our new electric buses. Yeah, and I hope that agreement will keep on giving, because if we are to continue adding to our fleet of electric vehicles, at least preliminary findings from Duke is that there will be some substantial upgrades to the electrical infrastructure to this whole area, this whole like block area, let alone in our facility. So Duke has programs like that. You know, they obviously want to sell more electricity, so when big industries or something comes in, then they pay for the infrastructure. So hopefully we'll have a continued relationship with Duke Power. So I think that's a good start to our electric bus fleet, which you all get to see tomorrow if you come down to downtown St. Pete. Pretty cool.
We are very excited. It's very exciting.
The legislative committee meeting, the PSA legislative committee is meeting on Wednesday, and will finalize our 2019 federal and state priorities. The state lobbying team of Ron Pierce and RSA Consulting and I met with, and I brought Whitney on our very first day to meet with Senator Brandis, and we had a good.
How'd that go?
It went as expected. We presented our list, and he had his own list of new and innovative autonomous things that we should do, which was our whole strategy, and it worked out really well. That we didn't really present him with a whole bunch of detailed plans, because we knew he would have his own, and he did. He had some really good ideas.
When this meeting is over, could you and I and Whitney just brainstorm a little bit, because I have a meeting with him on Friday.
Okay.
And I'd like to have a little background of where you left off, so
Yeah.
I can maybe capitalize on some of the information that you gleaned.
Yeah.
Good.
very pleased, he is no longer the chair of the Transportation and Economic Development, the TED Appropriations Committee.
But that's all gonna change after Election Day.
I guess it will, yeah.
So does he know now what he is gonna be doing? Because they usually will get a heads up if they're gonna be in leadership.
Well, he said that he wanted to stay as the chair of the it's called Criminal Justice, or,
Right.
Committee. That's what he said.
So
But I don't
who will,
know.
well, I'll talk to him about those appointments, because that would be important to get a handle on.
Yeah, I mean, but he is very interested in transportation still.
We know.
And the Senate knows that he is still very interested in
He's gonna
all
have
this.
his fingerprint on whatever goes on, that's for sure.
He identified that we are a leader in the state of Florida in transportation disadvantaged. Too bad Patty wasn't with us to hear that, but he knew that and wanted was very supportive of us continuing to do that. He invited us to the autonomous vehicle convention that they have every year. They've been having every year at the Marriott over in Tampa. It's in November.
Is it gonna be there again?
It's going to be there. My understanding is one more this year, and then it's moving to Orlando in 2019.
And what are the dates of that? Do you know?
It is the week after Thanksgiving, last week in November.
Madam Chair, can I ask a question?
Sure.
What were the 2 or 3 really things that were at the top of his list? Do you recall? A couple of the top things?
Well, number one on our list of discussion items was for clarity on the use of the bed tax, the tourist development tax that had been approved by the legislature last year, opened it up to be used for transportation or other activities that had a nexus with tourism, and there's a whole bunch of hoops that the Tourist Development Council and everything would have to go through. But that we've gotten some opinions from the Pinellas County Attorney that question whether it can be used for transportation purposes, because the legislation says the word facilities and not vehicles. So,
May I make a comment about that?
Yes.
I asked to have that put on the transportation for League of Cities for the legislative committee, and they did. They called me maybe a week ago, and they went through what I was interested in, and I said I wanted to make sure that all those words that are in there are for clarification for the TDC, and I want to make sure that all the counties or all the cities, municipalities, feel they have that understanding that it could be used for things like the Jolly Trolley.
yeah.
So that, I don't know where that's, we'll find out next Friday when we go to the meeting, but just so you know, it's at least on that agenda to discuss.
He said that he knew that attorneys around the state that lots of people were asking questions, but he asked that not be a specific agenda item on PSTA's wish list, because he had also heard very strongly from the hoteliers right after he had sponsored that bill that they were very negative about opening up the bed tax for anything but marketing.
Okay, so hold on 1 minute. I would like to speak to that. I just had lunch with a hotelier, and we talked a long time about the role of the TDC as it relates to the changes that were made by Senator Brandis last year. And I want to remind you that the entire year last year, it took all year long, while I was chair, to get those guys to agree that they would come to the table and be willing to have a discussion about using a portion of those dollars for transportation solutions that have a direct synergy to moving tourists around in our county. And they absolutely were on board with it. If they are telling him a different story, that's a big problem. And I recognize he's talking statewide. But our county is a lot different than the rest of the state.
He said he was talking to Pinellas County hoteliers.
I have no doubt that
That's-
they wanted to make sure that.
It was right after the session was over. This discussion happened.
Well, we have to keep talking
Well, of
because
course we do.
we're making huge change. I mean, we
Well,
have.
their concern's always gonna be marketing for their
Well,
hotels.
you said it
Yeah.
best, Commissioner. It doesn't matter how much money you give them, the advertising
They're always
guys
gonna do
will
more.
spend it no
Exactly.
matter how much it is. And by the way, it's not coming out of their advertising piece, which
I
is
know.
only 60%. So
Well,
they need to,
60% here, yeah.
yeah, they need to cool their jets and get over it.
So it's what, coming out of Beach for Nourishment?
It's
No.
coming out of the, remember the bed
No,
taxes?
that comes out of our 40%.
It comes out of the 40% that can be used for other purposes other than marketing and advertising.
Okay.
So yeah, it comes
So-
out of capital funding for things like stadiums and.
Yeah.
Got it, got it.
So Senator Brandis just, he personally felt like the intent of his activities last year was to allow transportation, including vehicles.
Well,
Uh,
intent
he
is.
was fine, but he just.
But remember, Brad, intent is a beautiful thing. But when the staff get it and they make their little tweaks and it goes through the process, intent goes right out the damn window if you're not
Yeah.
paying. And by the way, he was not the one that got that passed. Because it was an amendment, it wasn't, he couldn't get it done. It was an amendment that happened in the waning day of session. Kelly Stargell, who is from the middle of Florida somewhere, she put it as an amendment in the tax package. The tax package is probably 900 pages long, and nobody caught it till it was already done. That's how that got done.
Well, that's what we asked for that clarification and that clarification of that language that.
Well,
to
that
see-
can be
Yeah.
done, and by the way, that doesn't have to be done with a particular bill, it can be done as an amendment. So we have to get to the legislator who's gonna be on transportation and get them to be willing to sneak it in the tax bill at the 11th hour, because that's where it is. FYI.
Well, more to come on that. You'll have, well, no, you wouldn't have your meeting. We have our legislative meeting on Wednesday.
Yes, but I
Tomorrow-
have my
tomorrow.
meeting with him on Friday.
Right.
So I will push back on that piece right there, because he may think it's clear, the attorneys do not. And until they sign off on it, we can't get it done, right?
Right.
Right. And Ron will be here tomorrow, and he can
Oh, good.
weigh in on his thoughts on how we can make that happen. But
So Brad, I apologize, I interrupted you, I asked you that question, if there were two or three things, that was one that was very interesting, were there any others that were on the top of his?
yeah, I mean, we talked about whether or not he could provide us with support for funding of a permanent autonomous vehicle program, rather than just one-time money that we're using to run these ideas of a pilot.
What did he say?
He was open to that. He wanted, he said, what he should have said, he said, well, I really think I want to know what the problems are, and we really just don't want to do technology for technology's sake. We need to be addressing real issues.
Well, how about we fix the technology piece so that people aren't getting killed on the highway, and giving the whole damn thing a bad
That'd be a
name?
good idea.
Yeah, we talked about
Let's
that.
focus on that.
He's connected us with their insurance carrier, because the autonomous vehicle company that Cassandra's been dealing with put all the liability for their fancy cameras and stuff onto PSTA. If it goes off-road and kills somebody, then it would be PSTA. So, Senator,
Welcome to dealing with CSX. They do the same damn thing. All the liability becomes government, not
Yeah.
them.
So Senator Brandis has a friend, of course he does, that is an insurance person for the autonomous vehicle industry that we're going to talk to. One idea that I thought he had, which was really a good idea, was we talked about how we're going to launch a pilot program up in Tarpon Springs for senior citizens, that the city of Tarpon Springs has gotten a grant from Florida Hospital up there to help fund. And it is a benefit to the hospital to get senior citizens to the doctor's appointments because they lose a lot of money by cancellations and no-shows to appointments. So better transportation to and from their appointments saves them money. And he thought that was great, of course, especially that we were doing it with Uber. And then he said, well, what about the sheriff? Lots of people that miss appointments at the court with the court system, and that costs a lot. That costs the sheriff a lot of money, is what he was saying. And maybe we could do a similar kind of arrangement to get transportation to and from the courts that the sheriff would perhaps pay for, because it would save him money.
How does that cost the sheriff?
Because when
If anybody-
people don't show up for their hearings and
Well,
such,
that would be,
then-
doesn't do the
that would
hearings,
be
it's the court
that would be the
system.
clerk, not the sheriff.
okay.
Shows you how much he
Okay.
knows about how county government works.
Just
Maybe.
wondered.
So the clerk.
Cassandra.
I don't know.
I just,
Whitney, isn't that what he said? He said the
What-
sheriff.
The sheriff's office, yeah, for court dates.
Whatever.
That was an interesting idea. Anyway,
We could talk to Ken about it, but his budget's getting pretty burdensome too.
Yeah.
I mean, don't forget when you come up with those fancy pants idea, it's just another way that the state chooses to take their
Shift
responsibility
costs,
and
yeah.
shift it to the county, because we control their budgets.
Yeah, we don't need to solve that problem.
yeah. 6B on our agenda is the PSTA Heart MOU, renewing an annual meet.
Are you ever gonna have a meeting with them again? Maybe not.
I know Chair Long and I both have expressed a desire to have a meeting. The interim executive director of Heart has asked that it be deferred until they get a new leader. So I've asked him.
They just can't deal with success, right? Because those meetings have been they've been very positive. We've come away from them with some spectacular ideas
We
that we've
have.
actually implemented.
We have.
Oh.
We still have a shared risk manager. They declined to continue sharing a procurement director.
Well, they just had sour grapes because he came to work for us and left them.
Yeah.
Oh, well, whatever.
Anyway,
Too bad.
but we're gonna. They're interested in renewing the agreement, at least for the risk manager, for now.
Did we ever have the conversation with them about healthcare?
Yeah. Oh,
Weren't
yeah.
there some conversations about being able to save some dollars if we combined our healthcare?
Yes, we did a whole analysis of that with Hart. This was back when Catherine Egan was here, and it turned out it wouldn't. Well, it might save them a little bit of money, but it would increase PSTA's costs. What we had agreed to said no problem, as long as you pay for your health insurance plus you pay any incremental cost to our members that it would cost us.
Well, that's,
How is that,
it's not much of a deal.
how is that a deal?
It turned out not to be a deal, so they went on their own.
All right.
Anyway, and then we're gonna just highlight the Tarpon Springs
So-
event.
Don't we have to, where are we in our memorandum with T-Barda? It seems like it's been in place for a while already.
It's 6 months, so I believe it's on it's gonna come to the PSTA, to renew at our December meeting. And I think it's on the Michael told me this morning, November 16th, I think is the date of the T-Barda meeting for them to approve.
Have you had any conversations with David Green yet?
He and I have emailed back and forth, not specifically on the MOU.
I understand his start date is 26th.
Yes, that's my understanding too. That's the date of the Tea Party meeting. I don't know if he's
It
starting a day before or he's coming right into the meeting. I don't know. I know he'll be here for the 26th.
It's a Friday.
And he's already picked out a place to live.
Do we know where?
No.
Is it in Hillsborough or Pinellas?
I knew you were gonna ask, but Alan Zimmet did not know. I don't know. I just know that he's got a place. He signed a lease.
Alrighty then.
That's it for now.
What is going on, if you know, with the Forward Pinellas and the Hillsborough, the master plan? Do you know?
The-
Master plan.
The
Or the
You mean
regional?
the long range?
Well,
the consolidation.
Yeah,
The
that.
Oh, the
study.
consolidation. We have a third workshop coming up.
October 31st at
Yeah.
the port. I believe it's gonna be at the port.
It'll be the third and the final one.
Yeah. You will recall, well, I think it was actually at a T-BARTA meeting, when the two workshops about that study were done at the Pinellas Collaborative Labs. They were good discussions, but at a T-BARTA meeting that was held about a month ago at Hart, there was a room full of citizens that got up and spoke during the public comment period, opposed to merging or doing any kind of consolidation with Pinellas. And
Pat Kemp's.
yeah, and then she spoke about it. Commissioner Kemp spoke about it at the T-BARTA meeting about how concerned she was about it. So I think since this meeting will be at the port over in Hillsborough, I'd imagine maybe there will be a group of citizens that are not in favor of it.
Of course so.
Well, at the second workshop, to the best of my recollection, and I asked some other people, there was not one Hillsborough elected official there.
There wasn't.
There were
Yeah.
staff people representing, but there were no elected officials from Tampa or Hillsborough.
Not one.
I didn't see
Leslie
anybody.
Chapel.
I was looking for Jim.
Oh.
She
Yeah.
wasn't there, none of them were there. Meanwhile, we're always over on their side of the bridge.
Yeah.
How's that bus system?
I think it's actually Monday, October 29th is what I have on my calendar. Not the.
I thought you just said 31st.
I think it was the 31st.
I don't think I set a date. I have a hold on Monday, October 29th.
Oh, it's the 29th.
Okay.
That's what I got to, regional transportation workshop,
Okay.
Tampa Port.
The leadership PSTA graduation luncheon is October 31st.
Oh, yeah, look, I have it right there. Good. Okay, so are we ready to move on now to the Direct Connect contracts?
The Direct Connect contracts are another good news story. These are our contracts with Uber and CareRide and United Taxi for our first mile, last mile program. That since we expanded that to be county-wide and a lot more stops in April of this past year, the ridership has been really growing. And 2 years ago, when we signed a contract with all these guys and we put an upset limit of 150,000, I thought we would never, ever come close to hitting that. And we are. It's exciting. that ridership is growing, so we're about to hit our upset limit. So these are renewing those contracts to continue that first mile, last mile program. And then last week I was in Nashville, and we had a really good meeting with Lyft, who we do have a contract with for our Sandbox DART program, but we've never been able to get them to sign on to our first mile, last mile, and we've wanted to. And so we put it out there as a little carrot for them, and they seemed to really be excited. It was a really positive discussion.
Why didn't they
So-
want to, Brad? I'm interested in what their resistance was.
Well, way back in the olden days, 2016, when we were the first group to ever do this, they had some technical reasons they didn't want to do it. But those have all kind of changed, and then we have another agreement with them that they're working hard on. So I think it was really a matter of them kind of being distracted, or I don't know. But they've now seen the success we've had, and now they want in on the game. And they have upgraded their technology, so it seems like they can do it just fine. So it'll be good.
Any questions for Brad on that one? Okay, information?
I have a quick question. May I?
Sure.
Madam Chair?
Go ahead.
Brad, how many other services such as PSTA, I'll leave it like that, are using this concept of first and last mile? That was originally from here, correct?
It was.
Have other people?
There's a growing number. I would say, I don't know. Still not enormous. It's probably 20 or 25. I don't know. We had another meeting in Nashville at a bright and early time with Uber, and there was a handful of transit systems represented. We were the only one that had an agreement with Uber of the transit systems that were there. Washington Metro was there, Atlanta, MARTA, and Bonnie Epstein, our senior planner, who is our person that really kind of deals with them on a daily basis. Uber was there in the room, and they were announcing their new transit department, that they have hired all of these young men. When I say young, it's like 23-year-old people. And this was their first week on the job. And it was funny because basically Bonnie stayed after the meeting was over and basically taught them how to do their job, how to work with transit systems and what they had to do, what they had to do at their job, working with PSTA in our program. So I thought that was kind of funny that they don't know what they can do, what they're supposed to do, but we're still kind of leading them down the path. I have heard of Dayton, Ohio, completely copied our agreements, and they're in our benchmarking group with us, so they're friends with us, and they basically are doing a pretty neat thing with, I think, Lyft. There's one in Arizona. There's a handful.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
Yeah.
you.
excellent. Okay, now, we already did the employee surveys, right, Brad?
We did.
And the Tarpon Springs microtransit, did we already talk about that? I think you did.
We
The
did.
autonomous
Yes, just to confirm, Michael Case did confirm the 29th is good at the port. He confirmed that earlier today. So just.
And, so do we have any other business for the good of the order? Future meeting subjects, Brad?
We're also going to recognize Brian Scott for his service on the PSTA award.
Excellent.
Had a really great one-on-one with Vince Cox today.
And he told you how to spell his name.
What?
And he told you how to spell his name. Because you spelled it wrong in your transit, in your
Oh, I
Friday night. or
He
Friday
didn't
thing.
mention that.
Really?
My wife mentioned it. But
And you'll also recognize Whitney again, right, as our new person.
Sure.
So
As long as she wants to.
Our next meeting time,
9.
9 a.m. on December.
no,
Oh,
executive committee meeting.
oh,
Were we trying to change that?
Yes.
Because I
Nice.
can't, but.
when is our next meeting?
I'm trying to move it
Oh,
to,
yeah. It's supposed to be.
Is that the
1
2
o'clock in
November?
the afternoon. I haven't heard from everybody yet, but.
On what date?
You're here, on the 5th.
It's a no for me, but.
Right,
1 o'clock?
yeah,
I can do 1.
For the executive committee meeting?
yeah.
Oh, yeah, I can do one, sorry,
I can do 11 too.
I can do 11 too.
I have it down as
Oh.
11 right
What's
now.
wrong with
I had
Out
it
of
down, I
Doyle.
had it down as 11 too.
I can do 11.
I'll,
So should we leave
Can
it
you do
at 11 then?
leave it as is right now. I'll
Okay.
contact Doyle. He's the one that
Okay.
wanted him on it.
Yeah. Okay,
Okay, fine.
Doyle is telling me I can't do 11. I don't know, why not, Doyle?
I don't think he can hear you.
What's your la-
He's watching the live stream.
I don't care about that. It doesn't matter, Doyle. It will be fine. Don't worry, I'll take care of it. It's like
Okay.
talking to the cloud, literally talking to the cloud. Oh, that's so funny. Let's see. I had one more thing I wanted to bring up, but now I can't remember what it was I gave it when that happens. Okay. Well, then if there's nothing more, we can go to the order, I guess. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
kids.
See you tomorrow.
All right, Rachel, will you turn us off so I can talk to Brad and Whitney about my idea?
So we have to get
Brad, I'm
IT.
pushing. Why are we going to Indianapolis?
I have my work phone.
Shut up, their transit.
I just wondered what was there. What do they have going on in Indianapolis?
Question about Indianapolis. I thought that I had read that when they privatized their water resources system, they used that hundreds of millions of dollars to put into transit and complete streets.
Really?
They did. Well, no, they passed a referendum,